On the morning of 6 May 1953, a 20-year-old RAF mechanic named Ronald Maddison walked into a gas chamber at a government research facility in Wiltshire. He had been told he was helping find a cure for the common cold. He was offered 15 shillings and a 3-day leave pass. Within 20 minutes of having 200 milligrams of liquid sarin applied to his arm, Maddison lost consciousness. He died that morning. His body was delivered to his family in a steel coffin with the lid bolted down. His father was permitted to attend the inquest, held in secret, but was warned he would be prosecuted under the Official Secrets Act if he told anyone, including his own family, what he had heard. The inquest verdict was misadventure. It would take 51 years, a second inquest, and a family that refused to stop asking questions before a jury returned the correct verdict. Ronald Maddison had been unlawfully killed. No one was ever prosecuted. Porton Down opened in 1916 on Salisbury Plain as Britain's chemical warfare research station, built in response to Germany's use of chlorine and mustard gas at Ypres. That original purpose, understand what these agents do to the human body so soldiers can be protected, was defensible. What the facility became over the following 70 decades is a different story, and the distance between those two things is what the official history has spent a century papering over. Between 1939 and 1989, at least 20,000 British servicemen participated in what Porton Down called its Service Volunteer Program. That word volunteer deserves careful examination. Volunteers were recruited through notices posted at military establishments. They were offered small incentives, a few shillings, a short leave pass, sometimes simply a break from routine. Many were told the experiments concerned the common cold, which was technically true of a separate facility at Salisbury, the Common Cold Research Unit, whose existence appears to have been used to obscure what Porton Down was actually researching. What Porton Down was researching was mustard gas, then nerve agents, then in the 1960s, LSD and hallucinogens for MI6 mind control research. 3 servicemen who underwent LSD experiments were described being told they were helping find a cold cure. MI6 eventually settled out of court, payments described as under £17,500 per man, with no apology and no explanation. The Rawalpindi experiments run parallel to all of this, and in some ways more revealing, because the racial architecture of who was chosen as subjects is explicit in the records. Beginning in the early 1930s, Porton Down scientists traveled to a military installation in Rawalpindi, then British India, now Pakistan, and conducted mustard gas trials on British Indian Army soldiers. The soldiers were sent into gas chambers in shorts and cotton shirts, not told they were being exposed to a chemical warfare agent. The documented objective was to determine whether Indian soldiers had different skin sensitivity to mustard gas than white British soldiers, and whether different battlefield dosages would be required by race. Severely burned patients were hospitalized. The reports noted they were often very miserable and in considerable discomfort. No long-term follow-up was conducted. The solicitor who later represented affected parties called it a shameful abuse of power. The Ministry of Defense called it standard training protocol. The experiments ran for over a decade. No compensation was paid. No scientist was censured. Now here's the detail that sits at the center of this history, and that the official account moves past as quickly as possible. In August 1947, as a direct result of the Nazi doctors' trial at Nuremberg, the international medical community codified the 10 principles governing human experimentation. The first and most fundamental, the voluntary consent of the human subject, is absolutely essential, not preferable, essential. Britain was not an observer at Nuremberg. Britain was a prosecutor. The Nuremberg Code was adopted in 1947. Sarin experiments at Porton Down began in 1951. Research published in the Bulletin of the History of Medicine found that consent procedures at Porton had not been updated to incorporate the code's requirements. The institutional approach to recruiting and informing subjects appears not to have changed at all in response to standards Britain had helped establish just 4 years earlier. The Ministry of Defense's position, maintained consistently, is that the program was operated to the highest ethical standards of the day. That position is in the record, so is the Nuremberg Code. Both cannot be true simultaneously. In 1999, Wiltshire Constabulary opened a police investigation into Porton Down, named Operation Antler. It ran for 5 years. Over 700 former servicemen and their families came forward. Investigators developed 25 cases for possible prosecution. 8 were forwarded to the Crown Prosecution Service. In June 2006, the CPS confirmed there would be no prosecutions. The reason given was insufficient evidence. This requires reading carefully because the evidence was not missing, it was inaccessible. The CPS noted the papers were voluminous, stored in rooms full of boxes indexed only manually across multiple sites. Cross-referencing the material to establish specific criminal liability would have exceeded the statutory cost threshold for compliance. The evidence existed, it was too expensive to organize into a prosecutable case. That finding is in the Information Commissioner's decision notice. It is publicly available. It received almost no press coverage. One scientist identified having conducted the experiment in which Maddison died had emigrated to Canada, where he became an emeritus professor at the University of Calgary. Police confirmed they had located him but been unable to trace his whereabouts in the UK. He was not charged, not named publicly. His career had proceeded without interruption. The inquest into Ronald Maddison's death, the second one, 51 years after the first, lasted 64 days and heard approximately 100 witnesses. In November 2004, the jury returned its verdict, unlawfully killed. Cause of death, the application of a nerve agent in a non-therapeutic experiment. The Ministry of Defense applied to have the verdict quashed by judicial review. The application failed. The Ministry of Defense accepted the verdict on grounds of gross negligence and paid compensation to Maddison's family. No one was prosecuted. Maddison's body parts, brain tissue, spinal cord, skin, muscle, stomach, lung, were removed at post-mortem without his family's knowledge and used in subsequent toxicology experiments over several years. That detail is in the inquest record. It is not in the official history of Porton Down, written by the facility's own historian. 20,000 servicemen, mustard gas, sarin, nerve agents, anthrax, a 60-year program of non-therapeutic experimentation on British military personnel and colonized subjects, built on recruits told they were helping with cold research, conducted by an institution that helped prosecute the doctors who did comparable things at Nuremberg, overseen by scientists who were promoted and became emeritus professors, investigated by a police operation that developed 25 prosecutable cases and resulted in no prosecutions, examined by an inquest that took 51 years and returned a verdict the government then tried to appeal. The Porton Down experiment books, from which the cohort studied in the 2023 BMJ follow-up was reconstructed, are archived and accessible. The Operation Antler investigation files are held by Wiltshire Constabulary and the Crown Prosecution Service. The Rawalpindi experiment reports are in the National Archives. Ronald Maddison's second inquest transcript is in the public record. The Nuremberg Code is 4 pages long and has been publicly available since 1947. The documents are there. The question has never been whether the record exists. The question is what it means that the country which helped write the rules at Nuremberg was running experiments that violated them before the inquest tried, and that when a jury finally said so, half a century later, the government's first instinct was to appeal the verdict.